Hey everybody, this is James here with another development update for Kaboom and A Tomb of Doom. I've got a few fun things to show that we've been working on for the last little while. The game is really coming together now. It's kind of getting towards the end phase of development, and with that in mind also, it now has an official release date of June 1st this year. So basically 3 weeks from now, we're going to be releasing the game, and it's going to be awesome. If you haven't already, make sure you go and wishlist the game on Steam, because even if you don't end up buying the game, just wishlisting it really helps with releasing a game. And that's true of every game that you see on Steam in general. If you're a fan of any kind of indie game developers at all, you should always wishlist their games, because it doesn't cost you anything and it just helps everybody out in the long run. So with that in mind, go wishlist the game so we can all have fun on the day when it gets released. I'll probably be doing some fun stuff here on the channel when the game is releasing. But before all of that happens, we want to take a look about what's been happening with the game up till now. So let's dive in and see what has been changed since the last time we talked about Kaboom and the Tomb of Doom. So in the last video, we talked about how the game was pretty much all done in terms of gameplay. There's been a few random tweaks here and there that I've done along the way, but one thing I needed to replace was this little sort of cutscene here in the game. I like most of how this works here, but the little character on the screen there is pretty static. There's very much a placeholder bad guy that takes place there. So it's been replaced with this much nicer looking, when you run over here, there we go, there's the actual proper bad guy for the game, and it's now animated and everything, so when you go for your little bit of food at the end, you get all charged up and he gets all angry and a little bit more fun looking. It took a little bit of time to work on that, but I'm really happy how that looks at this point. But with the ending kind of little animation stuff in place, I also knew I wanted to have an intro cutscene. So I started off with a very rough version of this little cutscene at the start for Scoot falling in the pit of doom when trying to get some food. But obviously I started off with this very placeholder art here, just to get a general idea of how it would look in the game. And then eventually I replaced it with some slightly nicer looking graphics, which you can see here. So I literally just did this in the last week of working on the game in general, and we wanted to have this cutscene just to make it a little bit of fun. Obviously it's kind of a little bit smaller as well, just to have a kind of old school kind of animated cutscene style, and I think it works pretty well. It's fairly simple, but it gets the basic story concept behind the game in place. Not that there's much of a story in this game in general, it's pretty simple. It's get to the end of the tomb and get your little bit of food back at the end of the game. And speaking of those bits of food, I've also added a whole bunch more of them into the game as well, but we'll get to those in a few minutes when we talk about the UI. But I also added the ability to get achievements on Steam, which was a whole lot of work, it turns out. If that's something you want to add to your game, make sure that you plan to allot a good bit of time for that, because I think that took me like a day or 2 days to get that whole system working, to have a system for tracking whether you should be achieving things, and then most importantly sending it out to Steam to collect those achievements along the way. But it's worth having, and it's fun also to run around in your own game collecting achievements. Hooray! It's very sort of gratifying experience running around doing that. So those were the kind of most obvious visual things. There's been so many minor tweaks that we've done to the game in general. There's been audio things we worked on, but they don't really play very well in the video, obviously. And there's a lot of behind the scenes, hey, making the code run better, make the game run better, have a bit better performance and things like that. But that's not very exciting. But one major change that is very visual is the UI in the game. So this is what we originally had in the game. The game just starts up to this screen and you select your options, you do whatever you want to do and all this stuff. But this was all very placeholdery, and I knew when I was doing this was all very simple. It was all relatively subject to change. But some of the ideas I like being able to see the character and see the food that you're going for and things like that. So I knew I wanted to keep those things in place. But this menu system was much too simple and much too basic. And one of the really important things that I personally find is getting your menus looking nice is really important, because you should always remember that when a player encounters your game, first thing obviously they'll go by whether they buy the game or not usually depends on what they see in their screenshots, things like that. So your UI isn't going to affect the screenshots or anything like that. UI isn't going to be a selling point, but it is going to be something that keeps them playing your game. Again, with Steam especially, you don't want people to play your game for 10 minutes and then refund it. So you want every experience they have in those first 10 minutes to be good. So having an interesting looking UI immediately puts them in a good frame of mind. It makes them think positively about the game that you're working on, and it's really important to get your players into a positive mindset. You don't want your players to start at the game and then go, oh, look how basic this looks. Oh, let's go jump into the game and see what happens. You would rather have them thinking, oh, this looks cool, let's start playing the game and see what happens. So immediately they're slightly more positive about the game, and it just helps make things feel a little better. So with that in mind, obviously we don't want to stick with this very simple UI, so we now have this much more interesting looking screen that pops up when the game starts. You have this, what's called an attract screen, which comes from the kind of arcade days of trying to entice people to play your games. But we've got the logo on the screen, and all you do is when we click once, we get a nice flash, and then suddenly we're into a menu and there's things moving around and things like that, which is just all to grab the player's attention and make them feel more inclined to stay in your game. So from here, I've got a whole bunch of things here. I think I like the idea of trying to keep your menus as interactive as possible. One really important tip when working on your games for release, or even if you're making games for game jams, or even just for sharing with your friends, is make sure all the buttons are really obvious that they're interactable. So obviously this one is selected here, so it looks like it's selected. If I hover over all these other ones, they interact with me. If I click off, now I have none selected. And when I hover over them all like that, they all work nicely. And then when I click on one, we get this nice little menu transition, and then we're into here and we can see various different things. So here now we have 3 really important elements in our game here. We got the food that you're picking to go after, so I can click on this, and now I can select all of these, and they're all, again, nicely interactable along the way. So let's just go with the pizza here. And I can select my characters. I've got a whole bunch of characters select, and you get information about each character when you hover over them and things like that. So all of this is to entice the players to have some replay value, because they'll go, okay, I'll pick my character here, and then they'll go, well, there's more characters to unlock along the way. Obviously, when you actually start the game the first time, you'll only have these 3 characters here unlocked, and then you unlock more as you do different things in the game. You can see there's different requirements for each one. Let's go with this snaky dude. And then we can select our game mode over here. Again, you'll only have the first game mode available when you start the game, but when you complete the main game at all the rest of these get unlocked to play around and do different things in the game itself. But there you go. That's the general idea of the menu system. It's a bit more interesting than what we had before, and I think it works very well. And again, I think it accomplishes the objective of the UI, which is obviously to be clear and to be able to have your players navigate it well enough, but also to make them think positively about your game and make them think, oh, there's some effort put into this menu, is not just some kind of default template thing. And there we go. That's what the game is looking like at the moment. As I said, we're getting really close to release now. Most of the stuff in the game is pretty much all working. I'm going through a whole bunch of fixing bugs at the moment, and we're working on adding lots of music and sound into the game in general. So we're really looking forward to putting the game out. It's going to be a lot of fun. As I said, if you haven't already, make sure you wishlist it on Steam, because that really helps the game when it comes to launch time. And also, of course, it lets you know when the game is actually released. You get a nice little reminder telling you, hey, the game is out, come and check it out and see what's going on. I don't think Steam says that. I think that's just a mental message that gets sent to you somehow. But thanks for watching this video. I'll be back soon with more Scoot updates. I've got some tutorials in the work too, so there's lots of cool things happening. Keep being awesome, and I'll see you all very soon.